Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Georgie's Stripping the Dipping. My name is Colin Johnston, and I'm a motorsport history writer. But most importantly, I'm a huge motorsport fan, and I'm here this evening because we want to talk about the new Formula One season that's about to start. So great, looking forward to this new big season of Formula One. The new season, big races, big prizes, big stories. I think we should get a really big voice with big opinions involved. Our good friend of the podcast, Malik. Malik, good to see you this evening. How's things in Florida? How's things with you?
Actually, I'm in Georgia currently.
Ah, man,
So,
Georgia.
yeah, no, I was able to escape out of Florida, but I appreciate it. Thank you for having me. It's always fun.
Yeah, great to see you. Great to see you. How's things with you? And also, for folks who haven't seen you on the podcast before, how would you introduce yourself and what's your connection to motorsport?
So, my overall connection is I'm a fan. I'm a fan like all the rest of us. I am My specific connection would be when I was a whole lot younger, a whole lot better looking, a whole lot lighter, a whole lot lighter.
I
I
hear you.
used to wear a race, right? I used to wear a race, which is a motorcycle series. It would have been more equivalent to like super bikes
Yeah.
back when people were watching that, So this is late 90s, early 2000s. So I used to wear a race in this general southern region of the U.S. I used to race. I had a 748 Ducati, and then I was one of the first people. I started racing that. I raced a 998, and then I was amongst some of the first people to get a 1098 when they finally changed that body style to where it's cooler, a little under
Very
under.
nice.
And then so I had one of those. I wasn't anywhere near touching professional, of course, but my only real good claim to fame is that I'm 23-0 in the rain.
Hmm.
Um, the universe or O in the universe in the nice. So if it was nice out, dry, whatever, I'm not coming in better than third. But if it's raining, I'm gonna lap you. So you know, and that
Well,
was just it. I mean, I was a lunatic like that. So I was one of those guys.
that shows real talent. Oh, you say a lunatic, but if you're winning in the rain, you've got the touch, you've got that feel.
And it's not. It's to say semi-pro would be charitable. It was a bunch of guys. Somebody knows how to change your tires. You got to pay for your own tires. You got to pay for all your fuel. The race might be 12 laps. So that's it. And you would do it 3 times a day. Over the course of a weekend. But most of the time, you start off with 12 or 15 guys on a track. You're gonna lose 6 of them because they're gonna flip out or flip over. So but other than that, I mean, if I don't have to pay for their bikes, that's all that matters.
Good stuff, good stuff. And then sort of motor racing, and we're looking forward to Formula One this year. Big fan of Formula One? If so,
I,
how did it find its way to America to you?
I'm a ridiculous fan of Formula One. Of course, since 2021, for a lot of people, and it's not the whole. I've been watching. See, here in the States, I'm old, as you can tell from the Sopranos wings that I have on the side of my face here. I'm a little aged, and back when I was younger, Formula One used to be on this show called Wild World of Sports.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, as a historian, you'd be familiar with that. And so, of course, cars were cool for the time, but they kind of sucked. And it was competing with IndyCar. I didn't like just going around in circles because that's just boring. You can watch NASCAR for that. But so I got into F1 back then through watching Wild World of Sports. I'm a military kid. So my pops was in the military. So I traveled around the world, was able to watch more stuff. We ended up in the UK for about 4 months when I was in the third grade. Watched it then. That's how I kind of developed a little bit greater love for football or soccer here.
Mm-hmm.
So, but since then, just I plan my year, week, whatever you want to call it, based upon the races and my ability to be able to watch the race live.
Yeah.
I don't like watching it later because I'll end up finding out what happened as it's going on, and it's not exciting anymore.
And what era was this when you were getting started? Who were your heroes? Who were the first drivers catching your eye in Formula One?
So, here in the States, of course, they're going to keep pushing, your American drivers. So you've got your, what is the guy who just got the team? I don't know, I just went brain dead all of a sudden. The guy who just got the team, his dad, Andretti, pushed, even though that was the 70s and stuff. But they would push him, but he would always be on the show. You're looking at the tail end of your Laudas. Over the years, there was a brief period where I wasn't able to watch anything live because we were in Okinawa in Japan. And so you just have to hear about it or you watched them late. And so you had your Nicky Laudas, your James Hunts. When I started really becoming a fanatic was during the only time period that would be, similar to now with your Senna and your Prost and coming into your, oh my gosh, brain dead again. What's the Mansell in your Mansell time period? So your late 80s, early 90s time period. Yep. And then from there, it's just, over and over and over and over again. You fit it in with the activities, but we had limited viewer ability here in the States, so that was, one of the problems that we would have.
Yeah. And you're saying, of course, there's an echo now with that era because we had all the world champions at that time, with the famous picture of all the world champions on the wall with, with Piquet and Prost and Mansell and Senna, all the guys. And as you alluded to, we're kind of a situation like that now where we have such a range of great champions, multiple champions, and up-and-coming guys who are on the brink of their championships. But we're technically moving into such a very, very different stage compared to what those cars were in, say 91.
Right.
What do you make of, big picture, what do you make of this new formula for 2026?
Well, as it relates to the new design and functionality and all that stuff?
Yeah, the car and how we're going to go racing this year.
I don't know. I mean, none of us are driving. Okay. So for all of us, it's essentially a 92 Honda Accord versus a 30, whatever, some kind of a Ferrari that just came out or a Lamborghini. You know what I mean? So we don't know. We can only gauge. The only thing that we do know is we all universally hated the last generation of cars. Okay. We all just generally hated it because not so much that because it was just, Verstappen. And then the last 2 years, it was McLaren. They're the only ones that kind of figured it out. But I don't think that the racing was really as authentic as even, the initial hybrid era, or even one right before that when you had a Braun that would have come out of nowhere in a sea of Ferraris that were a good car, but you just had fairly average drivers, but for Kenny, you know what I mean?
Yep.
And then you had your McLarens and then, so you had, and then Ferrari again. So this new generation, we're the only thing that we can gauge a lot of the stuff on is based upon the feedback of the drivers. Sounds like they don't like it either. So sounds like the drivers are looking at how the cars are now, with how we thought about them this last generation. And then this whole 50-50 thing is I guess we'll have to wait to see.
Yeah, we'll have to wait to see. And it's interesting what you say about looking back across these generations to how the last formula, the outgoing formula, didn't work. It's just too big, too heavy, wheels too big. The ground effects never presented the opportunities that we hoped they would.
Sure.
And it's funny to think that everybody was surprised by porpoising, because you and me remember in the early 1980s where everybody was being shaken to bits in ground effect cars.
So, and the thing about
years ago.
Yeah, the thing about the porpoising though was you had such if you go back again, I'm not going to attempt to know the breadth of or have the breadth of knowledge that you would have, but when you look at the diversity of the designs of those cars during that initial ground effect era, you had a bunch of different types of, you almost had, steamboat looking cars, the ones with the huge looking smokestacks, like their barges and stuff.
But nobody knew what the hell they were doing, basically.
Correct.
Yeah,
and
because there wasn't the computers and there wasn't the,
and they
even if
gave
you
up
had
liberty,
the,
and you had privateers and all this other
yeah,
stuff. You could try to figure out stuff and try things and do things. It wasn't spy versus spy where you could run into the next guy, even though they did it, but you had a chance. Now it's almost like they've tried to create so much of a spec series with few minimal abilities to step forward with reliability and all this other stuff. And that's why it's starting to feel like it's tailing off, which is the reason why I don't like IndyCar.
yeah, yeah.
You
Well,
know, or
you're very
NASCAR.
right about that because I think looking back over these last couple of formula that we've had, it's, I'm not blaming them, but it's coincided with new ownership, a new way of thinking,
Right.
and there seems to be a sense.
Say
There,
it, because I know you're going that direction. Say it.
there
I
seems to
know
be a
you're going that
there
direction.
seems to be a sense that they're contriving the sport. They're shooting for an end goal of what they want within this narrow parameter. We want
Experience
this amount of power. We want
series.
to slide this much.
Right.
We want these lap times or whatever. And it comes back to the fact as well that they're saying this is the greatest change in the formula in the history of the sport. Now that's probably true, but what we didn't have before for 120 years was a governing body and an organization controlling the entirety of the event and the car.
Right.
We've had huge changes in the sport in the past, but they have come through innovation, and they've come through. They've seeped through where somebody has innovated, and other people have taken that idea and run with it, and made even bigger leaps in the sport than what we're making this year. But I think we're in the era of a contrived sport. Maybe contrived sport's the wrong way to put it because they will let them go racing, and for better or worse, the lights will go out and a flag will
Right.
drop and it'll race.
Right.
But they're trying to put together a business and sporting package that also includes the technicalities of the machine. And yeah, as you say, it's a very expensive way of having a spec car.
It's being run. Again, I'm in the U.S. Okay, and everything here is about money and investors and all this other stuff. And Formula One seems to be run in a very private equity sort of way.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
Yeah, you'll have some innovation, but we don't want to allow too much innovation or too much of a runaway team or whatever. Even
Because
though
it doesn't fit our narrative. It doesn't fit the world we want to build with our drive to survive, and there are,
right.
in terms of the organization, our perception of what we want the sport to be.
We want to maximize the amount of money. And so we want to corner all of these different areas, which is the reason why, you know what, instead of having these cities and stuff bid, whatever, and they, get the maximum amount of benefit, whether it's the stores, the vendors, the businesses locally, we want to be able to control the ability. We want to control it all. Right. And it's like, well, you do realize that this started from two guys who are about the same size, maybe one slightly larger, one slightly smaller, talking shit to each other. I can beat you, you can beat me. Really? Well, let's prove it.
Yep.
Now it's I can write a check bigger than your check. My checks are green. Well, I use black ink, you use blue ink. Well, I don't need that. I can print it off the printer and it's a cashier's check. Oh, well, I can use my black card. And that ain't racing. You know what I'm saying? And so,
But then that brings us okay. So we've looked at sort of big picture of where we are of
sure.
this new formula coming in. But the point then you make is maybe not quite working out as we expected it, because to bring it in a wee bit, we've had testing, we've had the prime example, probably jumping ahead of things a wee bit. We've had the prime example of Aston Martin, who Daddy Stroll has written all the big checks. And the new factory at Silverstone looks amazing on the side of the old Jordans. Just down the road on the industrial estate is Cadillac. And look at how Cadillac and Aston Martin have gone during testing, and how big bucks have not won out so far.
Well, I agree to the extent as a person that's not a part of it. But I think where that greater measure will be is not necessarily, Papa. I'm not even really going to include him because he's got such bad karma or whatever. Nothing that he does is going to succeed. Okay, he's just been lucky in my opinion, and he's got a kid that whatever. But I think the different dichotomy is going to be Audi and their absolute lack of success that I think that they're going to have. They're going to turn into Sauber, in my opinion. Well, they're Sauber. They're going to turn into that old middle version of Sauber versus Cadillac, who not just because of the adversity of coming in and all this other stuff, because everybody hated Michael. I mean, he's just they just did. That was the only reason why they kept him out. But I think
that's so sad, by the way, because Mario is so beloved. And I think from Mario's point, I'm lucky enough to interview Mario on the podcast. From Mario's point of view, it would have been so lovely and so special for the sport. But I completely get where you're coming from with the figurehead of the Formula
One. It was personal.
Yeah,
it was personal. Yeah, and I think them coming in, I think the problem, in my opinion, is they came in. We think we can come in with our methods and standards and all this other stuff that might be the whole system that we come with might be better than what's the established old guard, so to speak. And we don't want that under the guise of, well, it's going to split our money up. You didn't have that kind of resistance to Audi at all, right? They were buying, but you didn't have that kind of resistance. And I think Audi, who has been quiet, if they can get around the track and have any kind of success, I think would be, that's what I want to see. I think F1, well, I want to say F1, the FIA, I think, is really, really rooting against Cadillac as a way to, because remember, they could still technically get one more team in. Yes. And I think if they have any kind of success, that's going to pave the way for another team to come in within probably 3 years, right?
Do you think do you think that the FIA like having that leverage? Because obviously there's a power balance or a fight for power between the FIA as the governing body and all this control that now rests with Formula One, the organisation, whatever you want to call it, FOM, whatever you want to call it. Is there a sense that we don't like the president of the FIA, but the FIA as an organisation is maybe bristling a wee bit that they've lost so much control over their top tier sport, and that having that power over entries is maybe the last thing they've got that really to hold over the Formula One organisation?
FIA wants to be Suge Knight. Are you familiar with Suge Knight here in the U.S.?
No.
Okay, you're familiar with the Tupac and Biggie stuff, right?
Yeah.
Okay. The person that kind of exacerbated that stuff were the two people that were in charge of the record. Is dumb stuff, but the record labels. Puffy, who's in prison right now, or P. Diddy, and then Suge Knight. He was the death row guy. He was the West Coast guy. Okay. Everybody knows him as being like this big, scary, I rule through intimidation, and everybody just forgets it's still music, right?
Yeah.
Music. And so I think the FIA, as just the simple governing body, we make rules, but they got most of their money from F1 because it was the top. Okay. Now, there was an award show where Suge Knight comes out and he says, the president of Bad Boy wants to be all in the videos because he's just the president of the record company. Why is he in the videos and trying to be in all the songs? Right. So he made a point to call him out. And so that was the reference. The FIA, as just being the president of the record company, is for whatever reason not satisfied with just sitting back. And because F1 isn't just their only series, right? They got GT, they got all this other stuff. But for whatever reason, they want to act as if everything that happens is through them and not through. They want to take all the juice away from all of the teams and the owners and the people putting in. You can't get a privateer team at all, which I think F1 should be. But so I think they're trying to control so much and micromanage so much despite the fact that they still have other responsibilities, like they're throwing those to the wayside and not allowing those to grow to the level of F1. And I'm like, by doing that, you're messing the series up. Yeah, nobody likes the president. He sucks. But I mean, it's not enough to just shut up. That guy, apparently, because I know they have different series that happen on Sundays all over the world. Does he never show up to GT3 races to hand out trophies?
As a good point. Does he ever turn up at girls' kart races
Anything.
in the south of France or a random
An
place?
F2 race.
Yeah,
An F4 race. Does he ever do it? Because he's in charge of that too, right?
yeah.
Is that
He's in
not
charge,
good enough for him?
and he's in charge. He's in charge of road safety and everything
Right.
motoring throughout the world. Yeah, but
He
yeah,
should go up at the end and say,
he likes to give a medal. He likes to give a
nobody
medal.
crashed. We did our job. Our rules and this, that, and the other. We're satisfied because no one crashed into a wall. There was no fuel leaks. He doesn't talk about that. Any of that stuff. As the president, that should be not, coming out with his goofy looking coif and his just for men beard and handing out trophies and stuff. Yeah, I hate that.
Yeah.
I hate
But
that.
I think as well, we are in this. It's a crazy situation. I guess it all goes back. It all goes back to Bernie Ecclestone at the end of the '70s, and it's a bit of a bugbear of mine that people
Is
say,
it Bernie or is it Max? I mean, I know those two kind of went together.
yeah,
And they ultimately had to split it and stuff like that. But, Bernie was more the face. Max was more one of these on my shirt here. But
but I think the problem is, but that now you look back in terms of Bernie Ecclestone saved Formula One is kind of what people say, and I don't think that's true. Um, I, Bernie Ecclestone was the guy who happened to be in the right place at the right time with the right brain to pick up the slack and get shit done,
sure.
and build power from that. So people look back so fondly and say Bernie saved Formula One. If Bernie hadn't bothered, somebody else would come along. It was big time sport in the '70s. It would have been Marlboro money. It would have been Mark McCormick. It would have been somebody.
Right.
But I think a lot of our problems today stem back to that division, that spinning off of the FIA's World Drivers' Championship to a separate business. And I
But
think
but
it's the
remember,
only trouble.
but that split came because Bernie's whole deal was, yeah, I own it, I'm in charge of it, and he changed because the series was functional and it was going to survive as a spectator only, I show up butts in the seat type of race. But when he took control over the ability for anybody else to be able to watch it,
Yeah.
then
But I think that might have happened anyway because we were in that era of worldwide sport. We were in that era when color television was hitting, satellite broadcasting was
sure,
hitting, and I think
but
it was
that
too
was
good
when
a property
satellite
to be
broadcasting
left behind.
started to come in, right? And so then as it starts to evolve and gets to a lot more places, it still was a Eurocentric sport because you didn't have that communication. You didn't have the internet. You didn't have any of that stuff. So it was, and most of the, other than Kyalami and maybe Japan, all of them were all in one spot. And
Yeah.
so it was easier to just go to the race. Remember, Europe on the map is big. Europe on Earth is tiny. So you can actually get there. So people traveled around and it was a spectator sport. Then once the ability to, can stream and you can put it on this channel and then that channel and that channel. And then I think their biggest competition ended up being the DVR.
Hmm.
You didn't have to watch it right
Yep.
now. You could record it and come back and watch it later. That ran the risk of people not going to like how you guys have, or in Europe where they have some of the lower divisions can't watch a football match after a certain time on a certain day. It's like blacked out or something I'm going on that line. I don't know how to explain it, but I think that's where that issue comes. And so now as we're going to the different locations, they want to be able to control access. And it almost seems like you want to not even just licensing and copywriting and stuff like that, like how Ferrari does. If you buy one of their cars and you wreck it and they just steal it from you and tell you can never buy a car from them again, they want to control your ability to watch it, to be in its vicinity, like in Vegas where they're putting up the black screens. You can't walk over a bridge and peek through the screen to see it because, you might get 45 seconds of race that you didn't pay for. You know what I'm saying? And
Yep.
so that's when you start to turn people off. Your whole deal is the people that are diehards like myself, like you, we're going to be there. Every single time we're going to say, you know what, this is going to be my last race. And then you're going to watch like this, right? Every single week because you're disgusted at an outcome. But you watch that with your own football team, right? It's the same thing.
Yep.
Except for Slot, because I can't stand that guy. But as far as, Liberty Media and some of these other people, FIA, even F1 itself, it's supposed to grow the sport. It's supposed to, you have a job to maintain it. You have also the FIA's job is to mitigate loss, not to do any of this other stuff. It's just to mitigate loss, and then you create rules and yada, 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 and safety. But they're trying to control so much. It's so dictatorial that is a turnoff for folks like us, because now we're so used to we'll jump through a couple of hoops to watch something that we love. But we're not gonna, play just the old dog. And we're like, I'm not doing that. I'll watch something else.
Well, it's a bit of a dichotomy as well because Liberty coming in also opened up, and again, it was the times that we were in. They opened up social media and freed the teams in terms of being able to film in the paddock and generate their own content. And okay, Bernie didn't believe in social media, but social media maybe wasn't quite ready for us at Bernie's time. But now it is. So we have this sort of dichotomy now where there's a lot of content. Anybody with Instagram, anybody who follows the teams and any of the socials, and through their websites, and I'm lucky to contribute a wee bit now and again to Mercedes' website. Fantastic resources. So there's lots around the sport that fans can engage with and enjoy. But the race itself, as you say, sort of fades into the distance somewhat. You pay your money, you pay however many dollars a month for your whatever satellite system or whoever streaming it in your region, and it's expensive. It's expensive. I pay 3 times per month for my Formula One coverage. It's what I pay for Netflix. Or Spotify. I can have every song in the world, but I spend 3 times that amount of money per month to watch 2 Grand Prix.
Right. Two?
So,
Two?
Well, 2 or whatever it is now. There's 20 million races a year now, isn't there? It's every second week, and there's a sprint on Thursdays or something. Whatever they're doing nowadays. It's all over. But my point being that there's never been more content around it. If you're a fan of drivers and stories and behind the scenes and technical as well, there's never been more content. But in a way, is it drawing attention from the fact that the core product isn't as good as what it could be or was, and isn't as easily accessible and findable? Because you discovered Formula One, I discovered Formula One on my grandmother's TV. I pressed the right button one Sunday, and there it was.
Sure.
No kid does that anymore. Now, it's a different generation. Maybe they discovered through Instagram, and maybe they're happy not to really see so much racing, and maybe they're happy to explore stories. But is the tail wagging the dog in terms of coverage nowadays?
Well, I again, we're in 2 different spots, and we're in the collective West, but we are in 2 different versions of the West. Okay, and I'll say that. Europe, as it relates to sport, because you've got your football, you've got some of your smaller things like your tennis, whatever. Yeah. But you got, from what I understand, in let's say the UK itself, UK and Ireland, you've got cricket, football, motorsports. As it relates to motorsports, you've got Formula One, you've got GT racing, and you've got motorcycles. Okay. If you watch cricket and you really watch cricket, you're not watching anything else. Nobody cares. And then darts, I guess you're in Ireland, so everybody's throwing darts and stuff like that. I've seen those guys go off when it comes to darts. I don't get it, but it's just funny to see how everybody's having fun. Here, you're allowed to watch the coverage that you get is contingent upon the one or two media oligarchs, their ability to make money. They steer the social media back around to their ability to make money. And you're not, you can have like a person that is, let's say NASCAR, where they got like 500 cars in one race, right? Okay, well, if you're normally 300, you're just in the middle of the road, you're not going to be anything special. No one's going to give you any kind of attention. If you pull up and you lead a race or two, and they're like, oh, this is some guy in the car 4 is in the lead, but the person that we want to is in 77th. And they're going to talk about the fact that he's in 77th and what's going. So it's that. It's whoever they're betting and gambling and all this other stuff. And so it's based upon the amount of it's all money. And that's, the bad part about this country. We don't, other than football, okay, as far as American football, you're not allowed to really, even with motorsports, you're not allowed to do anything unless it makes money for the whomever they have decided to pick and choose. And I see a lot of that, because remember, you got American owners, Liberty Media now. So you see a lot of that where they're trying to stoke stuff. Now, I don't know if the media is the same here as it is in the UK. And a lot of stuff is starting to, a lot of our poison is making its way over there. Media wise, you guys are the goats as far as terrible media, right? But as far as TV drama, we're it. And a lot of that dumb TV drama stuff is making its way over there, to where Liberty Media is focusing on the fight between the inter conflict between Piastri and McLaren and all this other stuff. You don't have Verstappen and Hamilton as bad anymore. And you're never going to see that again. Tried with Piastri, but Piastri isn't playing along because his personality is like this pin right here. But
maybe he's got the right idea.
He's just dry. He's just dry. So
well, that brings us into the fact that this Friday, Drive to Survive comes out, the next series of it, and I end up sounding like an old bore. I end up just sounding like an old guy.
I didn't even watch the last one.
Well, I don't think I've finished any of the series of them, because I do genuinely think. Well, first of all, I think they're badly timed, because I think they land this time of the year.
Right.
And the last thing I want to do is relive drama from 10 months ago. I'm excited about next week.
Right.
So I don't want to live back there, I don't think I finished the series of it yet, because I run out of steam with it, this new series, the trailer for it appeared on YouTube a couple of weeks ago, and you're scrolling past the thought, I'll look at that there. There was a trailer for it. And it starts with the drivers are all standing about, and one of the drivers farts, and that's like, what is this, The Simpsons?
Right.
My feeling is,
he said a driver farts.
Yeah. And I was like, huh? And that's the start of the trailer. I was like, so. My feeling is these guys are heroes. They should be heroic. We should be selling motorsports in terms of these guys. Now, they're complicated characters, because maybe nobody who's quite right in the head goes down that life from they're 5 years old. But they're interesting people. They're maybe difficult people. Looking back through history, all our heroes, our Sennas and our Prosts and our Laudas, they're quirky, they're interesting. Some of them are maybe a bit disturbed. Mm-hmm. But they aren't comic book heroes. They aren't, it's not Peanuts or The Simpsons. They should be heroic, and we should aspire to be like them, at least until we find out how flawed they are.
Right. I mean, I think it's that part I haven't seen. I didn't know, but about the fart thing, it's just stupid.
I turned it off.
Yeah. I have not seen a single trailer. I don't live on Netflix either, but I haven't seen a single trailer. But if they're doing that, that's silly. One of the things, though, I think that is different is, and again, I can remember from, when you're younger, everybody that's older than you seems old, right? Everybody, because I got this, because I just don't shave it. But so I'm sure I look like a geezer. When I shave it off, I look 7 or 8 minutes younger, right? But if you go and you look at some of the old film, the old video, they look old. They, like Mansell back in like in 90 looks like Mansell now, right? And so, but all of these drivers were the same age as those guys back then. They all look like kids, and I feel like they're treating them as if they are still kids.
Yes.
Now, like James Hunt was 24, 23, 23, 24, 25 during all of that.
Yeah.
Nicky Lauda and chasing chicks and all this other stuff. Yeah, you can't do a lot of that stuff, and I blame Williams for that. But I digress. Claire, she ruined that for everybody. However, and I did go, overboard sometimes with the champagne and everything. But I think now you've got some geezer who doesn't understand TikTok and Twitter and the interconnectivity between them and fighting and arguing and everybody calling everybody racist and all this other kinds of stuff. That kind of PS3, I'm going to come and, kill your mom because I just, quick scoped you and all that kind of stuff. They don't get any of that because all of those guys that are running things now were old as hell back in the wild world of sports days, right? They were maybe 30 back then. So now they're, Bernie Eccleston's age now. And so they don't know how to do any of that stuff right. And I think they're selling it so terribly and they don't know how to bridge that. This stuff is run by young kids.
Yeah.
They don't have any kids that can relate. Even rich young kids don't get it because they're buying their cool. They're still lame. You know what I'm saying? And so, and they don't have that. And, for them to think that, oh, well, let's just show a fart. Kids will love that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's for 10-year-olds.
Right. And like
when I was 10-year-old and watching Formula One, I did Sky TV.
You just happened to fart while you were watching it, but that wasn't the whole point of the race.
They didn't put it on TV. But when I was 10 years old, like nowadays they have sometimes on Sky F1 in Europe, they have kids commentary where they have some kids in who are very talented kids and very enthusiastic, but they have these kids in providing an alternative commentary that you can turn on. And great. If it gets people involved and gets people enthusiastic, great, honestly. And I mean that. But when I was 10 years old...
You watched The Adult.
Yeah. I listened to Murray Walker. And I hung on every word. And then I went to the library and I got Nicky Lauda's book, it's probably here somewhere, on the art and technicalities of Grand Prix racing. I didn't want a colouring book.
Right.
I didn't want the early learners version of it.
Right.
It was like, this is an adult world and this is a sport full of heroes, full of bright colours and brave people and amazing machines. And I want to feel like the growing up in that world. Yeah. And
kids sneaking into the R-rated movie. No one is sneaking into the PG-rated movie.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Or the G, I don't know,
right.
rated. Yeah. Nobody's doing that.
Yeah, and, you're right.
And I mean, the adults aren't going to watch the kids because they're going to just sit there and the entire time and not listen to a single thing that they said, right? You know what I'm saying? They're just not. And no, I totally get it because none of those kids are racing. Those kids should maybe be in. Again, I don't want to, because you can stretch that out to a whole bunch of different areas. So it's a slippery slope type thing. Some people that say women shouldn't be the commentators for men's sports and vice versa. I know that's going on with the football over there in the UK and everything. But I think they think if you were to listen to what is being presented, it almost appears as if they think we are not capable of understanding the complexities of what's going on. And they think that they have to dumb it down for us. And for those of us who do know it and understand it, we get the complete opposite. I don't think you understand what it is that you have and own.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a point I often make, and I'm a bit of a crack record with it. I should probably qualify by saying, first of all, I'm I don't think of myself as being a gatekeeper, and I don't want to come across like that. And I think anybody who finds motorsport, whatever branch, however they find it, and however they engage with it, and whatever it gives to them, is legit and is wonderful, and they should go with it and love the sport in their own way. I genuinely think that. I feel that with Formula One, the word that I keep coming back to is there's no dignity anymore.
Yeah.
It's lost its dignity and its gravitas as being, even in small ways that they market it. And it comes back even to these new regulations and chasing something new, chasing something different.
Sure.
Always having to chase the next new, shiny thing instead of going, hang on a minute, everybody should be chasing us.
Right.
We're 120 years of Grand Prix motor racing. We're the guys. We will present great cars, great heroes, great races around the world. And we don't need to chase the fads. We don't need to chase the trends, because you guys who are starting your new series, you should wish that you were as good as us.
Right. Let me ask you this. Did you ever, let me preface this by asking you, what's your age? How old are you?
I am 54.
Okay, I'm 51. Did you ever at any time watch World Superbikes?
Yeah, I did. And
Okay.
MotoGP when it was available on TV as well. Yeah.
Okay,
Used to go see
so-
bikes live as well. Yeah.
Okay, so do you remember back, and I'm talking late 90s, I don't even know if World Superbikes is even still around because you can't find it anywhere, but late 90s, early 2000s, they'd go to Japan. Okay, they'd race in Japan. And I'm talking about the Troy Bayliss, Ruben Chow. I'm a Ducati guy. So Troy Bayliss, Ruben Chow's.
So your Max Biaggi sort of generation, that sort of.
Well, he was. Yeah, I'm talking.
It's a GP. Yeah.
Well, just GP racing because it wasn't MotoGP yet.
Yeah.
But Noriyuki Haga and stuff like that. So when they would go to Japan, okay, I think they had a race in Suzuka, and then they had another race at not Kailan, but I can't think of the other track. But they always had 4 or 5 racers or 4 or 5 privateer teams that were able to race in their home race, right?
Yes.
Remember that?
Yep.
And that created, because they always beat the World Superbike guys, always.
Yep.
Right. And they were just, like if it was like BSB guys, if it was just a BSB, they would all, they sometimes would win. I can't remember the guy who used to always win, but like at Brands Hatch and stuff like that. But those guys knew the track, and they're privateer bikes, and they would kill the guys that are on the factory teams. Yeah. So I say all that to preface this. As a person who has watched Formula One, okay, understanding the cars, the changes, understanding that something happens. The Monaco GP, okay, because most people are hating the Monaco GP primarily because the cars are too big. You've got that issue with who has control over the cameras and all, because it's the Monaco sports team or whatever. And I think or a sports club, and I think they're still in charge. Is that correct?
It was changing. It was always a French TV director, I think. I'm trying to remember. Was it last year? Maybe tried to introduce something. But yeah, there's been an issue.
Right.
Yep.
So what are your thoughts on this? Okay, I'm gonna what if the interviewer here, fan to fan, we're just talking shit as fans. Okay. What if there was, and maybe this can happen at Spa as well. Maybe not, just because it's so large. But the issue, the reason why Monaco is no longer fun is because the cars are too big. Not so much that they're too fast, but they're just too big. Okay. Then you have this whole fight. So what if for just that race, and again, you've got the cost cap and all this other stuff. What if for just that race, you have a one-off car that is based on, and you change it every year if you want to, that is based on 88, 89, 90, 91, 92 spec vehicles. Okay? Whether in that one race can be a race that is separate from the cost cap. You can do whatever you want to. The only difference is your spec frame is, you have to pick what year for that season. And perhaps the factory teams do that race. Perhaps you are allowed to have one or two at-large privateer teams that have the ability. Sponsors don't have to be the same because you still got to pay for it. Sponsors don't have to be the same. All for just that race, and now you're able. The engines might be, whatever suspect or whatnot. You have a limit as to what kind of engine you can do, but you have a normal qualifying. Let's say you have, remember how it had to be within 105% of the, which they don't do that in Formula One anymore. You had to be 105% of the qualifying lap, and they do that, and that's Monaco. Cars are a whole lot smaller. You still got your Hans, your screen, your devices and everything, your halo, but you have that. I would love to see 90, 91, 92 spec cars, even if you just do spec, and you just juice up the engine a little bit. But I would love to see those cars going around Monaco because you would have an actual race, one-off race, talk all the shit that you want, and it goes back to the prestige that it was. Then the next race, it's whatever. Those points don't count against you necessarily, don't count for you necessarily, unless till later on down the line, the factories, all involve themselves and they kick out the privateers again. FIA would do that. But in the meantime, that would be something for the fans, be something for the geezers like us. It would be something to where you can enjoy it. Monaco has its prestige again. You can treat it like the Kentucky Derby, and everybody wears their throwback outfits and all this other stuff because that's Monaco and that's what they would do. Yep. And nobody else does that other than the Kentucky Derby, right? Yep. Why wouldn't you do something like that? What would be your thoughts on something like that?
Well, two thoughts, or maybe three thoughts. First of all, I wrote about something very similar a handful of years ago, and I think it was about the time that Formula One changed ownership and started to mess with the races. And I wrote a piece on my website about what a Grand Prix weekend should be. Sure. And part of what I said was how World Championship Grand Prix should have this dignity and should be, down the line, how we expected over the years, but also to open up to non-championship races again. And in non-championship races, then you can run wild. Then you can you can have Formula Libre, you can have guest drivers, you can have shared liveries, you can have the junior driver in last year's car painted orange to satisfy some new sponsor, and you can put $1 million on the finish line and have all the fun you want. Sure. So that's one point. So yeah, I agree in terms of, I think outside of the constraints or outside of a world championship, I think there's a lot of potential for Formula One to do things like that.
Sure.
Secondly, of course, before all these restrictions, that's kind of what people did for Monaco to a certain extent back in the day. You'll know yourself. People brought short wheelbase cars.
Right.
Back in the 50s, they ran cars with no nose cone on the front because it would all get bashed up, and they accommodated this.
And that's what I'm getting at. Right.
Yeah, and that's been lost through moving towards a homologated car that has to stay the same all year long.
Right.
And you're right, the cars are just far too big.
Right.
The third thing is, but April, I'm going to Monaco for the Monaco Historic Racing, which proves your point entirely.
Right. And you still let them run it. Yeah. You mend that fight, that argument. You let them run that race. They all that stuff because it's a throwback of sorts race. Yep. And but you let them run it.
But you're absolutely right, and that's something because a lot of younger fans will say it's black and white, as with everything nowadays. With people, it's black and white.
You had to be
Monaco's shit. Bennett,
right.
There's no nuance in anybody anymore. Especially younger generations. It's a terrible thing to say, but I think it's an online thing. Nuance has been lost.
Because because the track layout. Where was your spot that you always wanted to watch the race? Because every corner of where it is. You have the area with the bushes. You have the area where the thing walks back. You have that house with the apartment that everybody can live. You know what I'm saying? My spot that I always wanted to watch was in this bush that curls back around. It's not by the fountain. But people like us that have watched it 1,000 times know, because you can't see anything in a tunnel, right? Which is where everybody wants to be. But there's this bush, and me and my lady were going to go out there. But there's this bush, and you could see it, and you could see, and they're getting after it. And so, yeah, I didn't mean to cut you, I didn't mean to cut you off, but that's for those of us who know Monaco,
Hmm.
we know Monaco. We know the
And
track.
what I would say to people is like, and I've said to a young fan who says just point blank, Monaco is a rubbish circuit and should
Right.
be binned. I would say, if you're in Europe, get a cheap flight to Nice and catch a €6 train to
Oh,
Monaco, and on Friday it is entirely free, and stand anywhere on the Monaco circuit and watch all the Grand Prix cars
right.
from 1929 to 1985.
Right. Really? Oh,
Really,
they're kind of parading through.
the turbo era
Yeah.
are there. Watch them around Monaco, and you will see that Monaco is not the problem.
Right.
You watch these races on the Sunday in the historic race,
Hmm.
1.5 litre Grand Prix cars from the 1960s,
Yeah.
which are whatever they're 180 brake horsepower,
Maybe.
tiny
Yeah.
tiny cars.
Right. Right.
Watch them race over 10 laps, and it's some of the best motor racing you will ever see.
Right. Right.
And you're talking about spots to pick. The Fridays is open to everybody. I've got grandstand tickets booked, but the Fridays open to everybody. And you're right, because it's such a small place.
Hmm.
The final corner, Anthony Nogues, just on the outside of it, just as they come round the Ras
Yeah.
Cast and come up to Anthony Nogues, there's a wee tiny wee grandstand there, and it's like benches in the park,
Hmm.
and there's a tree, and you sit in the shade of this tree, and eat your sandwich or drink your
Right.
beer and sit there in the shade and watch 100 years of Grand Prix history come past you.
Right.
And you think to yourself, this is the best sport in the world. And 2026, oh, let's say 2025,
Hmm.
it has not been the best version of this sport of this last century.
So let me ask you this then. Let's say, notwithstanding Monaco, let's say we were able to have that throwback race for Monaco. But at the same time, we understand the value from a pure race fan, regardless of what the series is. We understand the value of the privateer because that's how it all started.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
what would be your opinion then? Because everybody hates the sprint. What would be your opinion? Because they want to add more sprint races.
Yeah, there was double
Like
them. Yeah.
the tracks are stupid and they're cut out. So then, why not then? Let's say and they want to have more races because we got what 24 races, 25 races, something like that. I don't know
Yeah,
what they are this year. Is it still the
I wrote
same?
it down. Yeah, we've got 24 races and 6 sprints coming this year. And
Okay, so
they want to double the sprints going forward. Yeah.
what if we raise the race number to 25? Okay, which in and of itself that sucks, but we raise the races to 25. We have 5 sprint weekends. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
20 tracks, 5 sprint weekends. In those sprint weekends, we have that same kind of not necessarily the same cars, but we
Yeah.
have a very similar setup to what we would have at Monaco, where you're allowing 5 privateer teams to line up because you don't have that same constraint that you would. Formula One was able to exist with 30 cars,
Yeah.
right? On
Yeah.
some of this exact same tracks,
Yeah.
right? Actual tracks. So now they're limited to 20 for money purposes and all this other stuff. But for those sprint races, the sprint races can be, that's F1 is trying to control all that because they're in the different towns and cities. So maybe that payout is a little bit different. So let's just say for those 5 sprint races, you have that World Superbikes kind of setup. You're allowed to have 5 privateer teams. The benefit of those 5 privateer teams is they might have 5 races in the entire year to be able to raise money to race, to show up and all this other stuff.
Yep.
They do terribly, right? For the sake of the car being nice and well in the whole nine, they have the same chance as anybody else. Maybe there's a different limitation for the car. Maybe it's a completely different car. Who knows? Maybe that spec car is, how you go about doing it, I don't know. But it's just
Yeah.
the idea that you have your sprint races be this, not really a step down, but
Mm-hmm.
got a smaller car. Maybe it's as fast. Maybe the engine still has to be the same. Maybe you're buying an engine for that one race or 5 races, Now you've got other sponsors that are able to come in
Yep.
for those 5 races. You're not limited to the 20 teams now. So you got more sponsors around the world, the whole 9. You add all your different liveries. And you do something like that on a street track in town. And all that, I think, would, because you already do something similar in GT racing, right? You already do something. Now, I don't want 5 or 6 different kinds of cars on a Formula One race, but you still already have something like that to where I'm the 2026 privateer sprint race champion as a person that is only raced during the sprint weekends.
Yep.
And it could be Formula 2 drivers. It could be whomever, it could be Indy guys, because Indy car drivers are also on those same kinds of street tracks.
Yep.
Right? Like Long Beach used to be and stuff like that.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it comes back to what I sort of said before and thought about a few years ago in terms of, I think we need races that exist outside of the World Championship.
Right.
I still call it the World Drivers' Championship. So I think there's room to ring fence the World Drivers' Championship as a dignified thing that we all recognise over this last 30 years or whatever. But then just to go crazy to if you want to do new and exciting things around Formula One and appeal to younger people or fictitious demographics, whoever you think wants all these sprint races.
Right.
I don't know where Domenicali's looking. Domenicali says social media, everybody's crying for 12 sprint races. He's not reading the social media feeds that I'm reading.
He's reading his AOL.
The best thing anybody says about sprint races is they're better than an FP3. So they're damned by faint praise. Nobody's really jumping up and down for a sprint race. But yeah, I agree with you. I think if you want to do the crazy things, if you want to do the things that crossover in terms of branding, the crossover in terms of drivers, that crossover in terms of how we go racing and how we score points and how races are won, I think there's a world outside, let's call it non-championship races.
Sure.
But I think over and above that as well, I would like to see a reintroduction of something like the old pro car racings. I think we need better support races as well. And I think that's also a place where we can bring the heroes of Formula One out on a Sunday morning, Saturday afternoon, the heroes that we know, and have them alongside then the guest drivers. The guest drivers could be the local hot shoes. The guest drivers could be the celeb who's a bit talented. The guest driver could be the world champion from 5 years ago who fancies a bit of a run out.
Right.
And let's have a bit of door banging and a bit of fun and because that's where the sport's always lived, and that's where talent has been found. It comes to mind even in terms of Vartzi coming back from Argentina in 1940 and saying, I have seen the future of motor racing. It's Juan Manuel Fangio, and if he ever comes to Europe, God help us all. So that crossover has to happen for the good of the sport. And I think you're right. I think we need more crossover, but I think we need to ring fence the Formula One World Championship so it doesn't become any more of a circus than perhaps it can tend towards now.
It needs assistance. They put so much on reality TV type stuff, and we're getting these new fans and the whole 9, and these new fans are flighty because they most of those particular fans didn't play sports. They didn't engage in sports. They didn't watch anything with their dad, probably because their dad didn't want anything to do with them because they didn't like sports. They were playing Roblox and all this other kinds of nerdy stuff, right? Which, maybe it's nerdy. I don't know, because I've never played Roblox. It could be the most intellectual thing in the world, but that's the problem, that you don't have anybody. And remember, when I first started watching in probably 82, I was 7. Okay. If I went out, again, I'm 7, but let's say I was 14, just starting watching that in 82. Mm-hmm. Okay. Somebody that's been watching during the 70s is probably going to, you don't know anything about this, that, blah, blah, blah. So that's normal. Okay. But
that is normal.
But they're going to respect the fact that I'm there watching. Like, I don't know anything about this. I'm just watching what I have right now. And then as I go, I'm going. Again, we don't have all the distractions of Twitter and social media and all this other stuff. You watch the race. we didn't have here in the States, we didn't have the ability to watch it live. We got it hours and hours and hours later, but we didn't have internet to, find out who won before it was done. We don't have that now. And I think it's hard to grow a sport where a lot of these people don't feel like they are a part of it. I'm not on a team. I'm not racing. However, okay, I plan my year and week and weekends and all this other stuff according to my ability to watch the race when it's happening.
Yeah.
Which makes me a part of it. Whereas
which should make you a valuable commodity to the business.
Right. Because I've got an airplane. I go out and I'm not practicing law anymore. So I go out and I ag spray, and there's all this important stuff, and all the races are early in the morning. So we have to, other than like say, Japan and stuff like that, and some of the super late ones. But which I don't watch anymore because I'm old and I got to get some sleep. But I'm like, listen, I am planning my life around that. And Liverpool football matches is the same thing. Right. So, when they're the same weekend, it really sucks. But I'm planning that in that way. These kids are just like, I heard that the cars went around in this weird kind of circle, and Lewis Hamilton, oh my gosh, I love his hair. He, I guess he did really, really well. He's my favorite because I saw him. He looked so pretty at the Met Gala and all this other stuff. I saw his outfit, and yeah, he's the greatest racer. And I heard he's dating Kim Kardashian, and I like her because I was told I was supposed to. And, it's like, where's the racing? Oh, I'm a race fan because I like that guy. What do you know about him? He dates Kim Kardashian. That's it.
But that comes back to something I said half an hour ago, but where all the stuff in the periphery of it is so accessible.
Yeah.
All the, and there's so much good stuff amongst it, but there's so much stuff that is just fluff around the sport. That the core of the sport is hard to get at sometimes, and okay, if you're saying about, Lewis Hamilton, I like him because I like his hair. I think back to 1982, I like Keke Rosberg because he stubbed out a cigarette and then went at 150 mile an hour, and he was like, whoa, that's a guy. So
I mean, how many red pill guys would have loved James Hunt? You know what I mean? It all comes back around. But now they're almost not allowed to even do and be that way. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
I mean, I could not imagine, but maybe Alonso, but maybe Magnussen as being, personality and, beat my chest, maybe even Max as far as just being, like some of the just very Dutch things that he says as being anything remotely close to any of those guys back in the day, personality wise, right? Other than that, I mean, Lando.
Lando, I'd be very careful. I'm careful about what I say about Lando because Lando seems like a really nice guy.
Sure.
But
I
wouldn't be the biggest fan of him as a racing driver. I wouldn't be the biggest fan of him in terms of how sometimes he conducts himself or answers questions, but that's okay. Everybody's different. Put it like this. If somebody said to me, you're a team manager and you could have either one of the McLaren drivers, I would choose Oscar Piastri every single time. But
any driver,
Yep, but I think we've got all these different personalities. But I think you're right. It really comes back to the ones. It's the guys who have either realised they've achieved everything they want to achieve in the sport. Your Lewis Hamiltons, your Max Verstappen's to a certain extent because he's happy. He just loves driving racing cars.
Yeah.
So it's the guys who don't give a shit anymore about what people think. They're there and they're competitive, but that in a way kind of brings me back to 2026 and what we're anticipating, because if we have these racing cars that are so different, and I think they're going to disappoint us in several ways. I think technically, we're going to see some very strange scenes of cars going slowly on occasions. But I think at its core, where we've got 1,000 horsepower racing car, 50/50 electricity. Yeah, and we've got this aero that opens on every straight. Um, I've got a feeling that the guys, the old big balls guys, are going to come to the fore. Because I think certainly until this formula gets more finessed, I think it's going to be about the guys who can live with booting it, leveling the wings out, and dealing with it on the exit of the corner and getting down that straight as fast as possible. And I can see, even if the machines aren't the best machines, I can see it playing to the likes of Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton and Fernando Alonso. Will they win races or not is another thing, but we make it a bit of a spectacle.
I mean, if so, I haven't. We don't have access to as much of the testing stuff, so I've tried to make it a point to look and watch as much as I can to get an understanding of as to what it is I'm going to be seeing next week.
Yeah.
Right? It's insane that it starts next weekend. The whole because they are racing in Baku this year, correct or no?
Yes, they are. They are.
Okay.
So it's a wee bit later this year.
I can envision with the complaints that they've been having that every single car stops 4/5 of the way down that straight.
I think they're going to need a lot of white flags.
Right. There's going to be a ton of people stopping, slowing down. I mean, it's not going to be an issue where the cars are outside of the lines and breaching the borders and all this other stuff. I think it's going to be a situation where these cars are just going to stop. I mean,
they're also saying as well in terms of coming back to these talking about the new fans, that how it's we have the journalists are out at testing, our TV presenters, your Ted Kravitz, the people with huge experience who really know the inside out of the sport, and they're saying this is a wee bit complicated.
Yeah,
for us, we're going to have all these new fans that supposedly are fans for keeps, according to Dominicali. They're going to now see Lewis Hamilton get zapped on the straight by, I don't know, whoever, a racing bull in the middle of the race.
Oh, he's
and the story will be that momentarily Lewis will be doing something electrical and he'll be back in the fight in a minute.
Right. Yeah.
But how do you tell that story? How do you get people to understand that all of a sudden, oh, Lewis Hamilton's a bit shit on that lap? Well, he's not, right, because he's trying to juggle 5 things, and the engineer sends something and he's recharging something.
I mean, you might as well have a microwave and have somebody just making burritos while they're driving. Also, I mean, there's so much. Again, we're only going off of the outputs that the drivers are saying, and there's a degree of sandbagging, there's a degree of off-putting that they're doing. I haven't quite figured out what it is, and then like Hamilton used to do all the time. What I mean? He would stave 30 horsepower always, and then get out there and like later, right? Just
man, one of my tires are dead. 15 laps later, boom, boom,
right,
boom, boom.
Right, pulling up. The only thing that Stroll could do was drive forever without his tires dying off because he's in last. But I mean, I'm interested. I'm so, and this is kind of full circling back to what we were talking about with the FIA. I'm so disgusted. I don't know if that's the best word, but I'll just use it. Disgusted at the level of interference that the FIA has put in, that I think the only way for there to be the innovation that we all want, which is still unfortunately take time and we're not getting any younger, is to see and watch their idea of progress fall completely and totally flat on its face by the people who can drive and are fast, and they can't do anything with this garbagey spec. Because I would assume it's just a CPU. I assume you can program in, okay, let's change it from 50/50, just do an iOS update to 75/25, which maybe
I'm sure energy deployment will be, and they'll probably learn a lot from the Formula E guys. But yeah, energy as much as they'll have a button to give them full whack if they want it, there'll be so much energy management, and I've always said managing your resources has always been a part of Grand Prix racing, but we could see it we could always see managing tires. We could always see somebody short shifting. We could always see when somebody lost third gear.
But from what I
Very,
understand,
very,
I don't mean, but from what I understand, because there's no longer the same type of DRS, so the recharging of the system is based upon the brake usage, right? It's basically like Black Panther's outfit. Like whenever somebody hits him, he gets more power and he can push it back off, right? So
yeah. Well, that's it. The kinetic energy's still there, but they've removed the MGUH that
right,
regenerated the heat from the turbo,
okay,
and vice versa helps spin up the turbo, and that's why they have the problem with the starts that they've tried to have. And again,
how's that gonna go?
yeah, and again, I said it online at the time that this is the first sign that the people, the big brains who came up with this formula have feet of clay, because Ferrari warned them a year ago and said, you know what, guys, you've done away with this. It's going to take a while to get these turbos spinning. Your starts are going to be a problem. Nobody listened. And now we've reached the stage where they're already modifying, or potentially modifying, the start procedure of a Grand Prix to compensate for a flaw in the formula that they've spent 2 or 3 years dreaming up. You know, there's no joined up thinking here.
Because who's going to win? It's basically going to be not win the race, but it's basically going to be I'm brain dead here. The Formula One movie. Okay, you know, when dude comes in, he's qualifies last, but he then creeps up, and then they do the lights, and then he's able to take off. It's going to essentially, you know what I'm saying? I would assume it's going to be a situation like that, because everybody that's way up in the front, nobody's going to want to get to the start line.
Well, that's what they've done. And one of maybe their last 2 practice starts that they did, they built an extra 5 seconds into the start procedure, where everybody would come around and pull into their grid slot, and it would be a full 5 seconds of everybody just sitting there. You know, fill your boots, you've got 5 seconds, spin, 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 and then they would start the start light procedure. So, but to me, the fact when you have to change the practical regulations that run the race to accommodate the technical flaws in the cars, we're in crazy world.
Right. Yeah, you're not. I mean, yeah. I mean, I could only win a race in the wet, so we all started slow. I could run in the middle and finish fast, and you didn't have to worry about braking at the end. But I'm interested in seeing some of that now. The only positive take that I have from that is the fact that it's under the guise of an innovation, right? It's the guise of some sort of innovation. And as we know, with Formula One, the technology and all this other stuff has made its way into, you know, some of the cars that we drive now. I don't see.
And it's genuinely fascinating. I agree. You know, just sorry to jump in, but I agree with you. The technical side is amazing. What these teams do.
So I'm excited to see that. That's as positive as I can get and be without throwing my back out. Okay. But the cynical, still angry about 2021 aspect of me is still, of course, I want it to happen to everybody else except for my guy, right? So, and as it should. But I think that my love for F1 hasn't necessarily diminished, but it has been tripped up a lot to where I almost don't expect a race or a scenario to run as unpredictably smoothly as I would have expected it. You know, anything and everything can happen and all this other stuff, but you still expected the race to be a race.
Yes.
And I don't think
there were rules about running the race that were always set in stones. You know, from the time you and me started watching at the start of the 80s until 5 years ago, and you talk about 2021 about being an on-the-fly rule change that was illegal, but actually in so many small ways and in so many small decisions, Grand Prix racing was always the same from when you and I was a kid until about 5 years ago. And now we're left with some rulings, decisions, flags, starting and stopping, different things that you go, not only did they never do it like that, that just doesn't make any sense.
It's the worst version of VAR. You know what I'm saying? It's
Yeah.
it is, and it's like, well, we only allowed VAR because you guys kept complaining about the bad decisions that we have made recently, which have always occurred. Okay, there's always an element of bad decision. So now, even though we saw that this is what happened, you want VAR to look at it, so we're going to do it. Oh, well, yeah. And it's almost as if the people that make the rules, like the refs for football and VAR, are like, well, this is what you wanted, regardless of the fact that I did see what everybody else saw. That's what you wanted. Therefore,
Yep.
You think that I'm not that good, so I'm going to let this new technology, because you don't think that we're smart enough and good enough to do it.
Yep.
So,
And the four cameras with the AI says he's offside because his nose was that much.
right. And so I think, again, like I was saying, I think F1 is, you can be hopeful because, I'm 30 plus 40 years into the game of watching this, right? And I turned my back on the NFL. I watched the NFL religiously from the time that my first match. I mean, I remember, the Mean Joe Green and all those guys back in the very, very late 70s. But I fell in love with the NFL watching the Dwight Clark, or the Joe Montana, the Dwight Clark, the catch. I was watching that live when I was 7, I think. Right. And I've always been a 49er fan up until 2014 and the whole Kaepernick, aspect and all that stuff, and how the owners were doing what they were doing deliberately. And then you start to see things, of course we live in the States and it's just jacked up here, but you start to see that, and then, doesn't occur in the NBA because they're way more controlled and they just, they care about their money a little bit more. Now the NFL just sucks. And I have not watched a game in over 10 years, right? I can walk away. I don't watch MotoGP the same. I don't watch it at all anymore. And I lived and died for motorcycle racing, right? World Superbikes, can't find it. I don't know if it even still exists anymore.
But MotoGP, there's an example of MotoGP as a sport that actually wants to follow Formula One. And that now are actually pretty much, now got the same owners, but even before that, it was like, we want to echo the success that Formula One has had within this last 5 years. Even bloody Gunther Steiner's there now. It's crazy.
Again, we're talking about Formula One, but I mean, if I were to draw the comparisons, it's different when you're talking about, and this is still Superbikes, but your Kawasaki, your Team Muzzies and all that kind of stuff back in the very, very early 90s, right? Even I remember when, Casey Stoner was basically Verstappen, right? He was a jerk. He was just, I didn't think he was all that good, but he won races. Okay. But I remember when they had that transition from just 500 GP racing to MotoGP, and then they gave them a couple of years and they mixed them up, and you had people like Olivier Jacques was still kicking ass in his old 500 GT, and they, or even World Superbikes, when you had Pier Francesco Chili, who refused to change his bike, and he was still kicking the new bikes' asses, and as far as Ducatis. And so they said, we're just going to ban you and not let you race. And that was drama. I lived to watch that stuff. Every week it was going to be something, different. Now, because Ducati sucked at the very, very beginning. They didn't start winning until, from what I understand, a couple of years ago. And they sucked in MotoGP, right? It was, Daijiro Kato, when I was watching the crash, when you had Max Biaggi, the only reason why you're winning is because you're in a Honda. Oh, really? Let me switch bikes. And he smashed him this first year, second year, third year, and that. That doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. And I wish if MotoGP goes the way of Formula One, because from what I understand, they had a whole bunch of years of just low, right? You know, because nobody's buying motorcycles anymore. Nobody's really buying sports cars because you can't afford them, right? So nobody's buying any of that stuff. And I think that might have, you know, a problem as it relates to Formula One also, because nobody's going out driving and racing. I mean, they're going out racing and hitting each other and killing each other and stuff like that. But nobody's going out and doing that stuff. There's no, you know, empty roads and stretches of highway that people can go out and fart around and do dumb stuff. Instead, they're just videoing farts, right? And, you know, so you people who loved racing, like I'm a Nissan guy. I'm a Z guy. I've had 7 or 8 of them my entire life. I live out in the boonies now, and I got a pickup truck. But I still got 370 sitting over here.
Yep.
On a 240. I want a 72 240, right? That's, but
Great car.
Used to be $2,000. Now they're 50, 60,000 if you can find one, right? And it's going to be rusty. And I'm just going to stretch. You know, we got nothing but stretches of highway out here, so we can do it. Just don't hit a deer. And so, you know, that's the kind of stuff that I miss and love about racing. And Formula One is a production. It is not a race. You're not watching a Formula One race. You're watching a Formula One, the company and corporation production. And the lead up to it is corny. You know, silencing Ted Kravitz, who, you know, a couple of years ago was horrible. I honestly, it sounds goofy. I think that Formula One is for this year, especially, is going to be impacted negatively without Horner in many ways, because there isn't a douchebag owner like Horner. Horner was an asshole. He was, you know, he was a showman because it's Red Bull, right? But no one can say he didn't do his job right, right?
Absolutely.
Now, on the other side, you had Steiner, who was a personality, sucked at his job.
Yep.
Terrible at his job. Had an owner who didn't want to replace him, probably because they had to pay somebody more money, but also sucked as an owner. Got a guy in there who was like, guess I just have to do what I can with what I got, and has some success. You know, you know, it literally is like Arne Slot, his first year. Again, I hate Arne Slot. His first year came out, had nothing greater, better, anything like that. Came out, did significantly better, right? Had a couple of races where they were in front. Never would have had that with Steiner, right?
Absolutely.
You know, so, you know, and you had to be a fan and know, and those are middle teams and rear teams, right? That don't get the same airtime, but you know what's going on because you watch it, you invested. You know, it's not like I'm only going to watch my guy. Yeah, I'm only going to watch my guy. I hope my guy wins. But my third choice guy, who I don't really still ever want him to win, I just want him to do better than these other guys, or than the second place guy.
Yep.
You know, and so that's a fan. And I don't think people are as invested in the racing to know that that's going on. I don't care what happens in 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th place, unless my guy is there moving up. It's the only time I ever care. But now these people, they're just like, I'm just here to watch my guy go around in circles. I don't even know what he did. He just was there.
Yep.
And then
that's a good point to make, because it's about one guy now for all these new fans, and you and me, we came into the sport and we loved the sport, and maybe there was 2 or 3 faces that we latched onto early on, but we very quickly realised that drivers come and go very, very quickly, and if you're going to love this sport, you have to love the sport. And as you say, have your 3 or 4 guys who catch your eye and you're always happy to see them do well. Yeah. But you have to very quickly realise that if you don't love the sport, in 5 years' time, this personality who you're so attached to, he'll be getting fat on a beach somewhere or doing commentary, and you know, what are you going to do then? And the sport has to think in terms of what are those fans going to do then? You know, we're very close to Lewis's time being up in Formula One. And what's going to happen to that big block of fans? How's the sport going to keep them?
I mean, I've thought about that because does Formula One sustain me or keep me after Lewis is gone? Okay. And I went through that exact same thing with, say, MotoGP. The bad part is, or even let's say World Superbikes is probably a little different, because World Superbikes, again, they're factory, but you have a glut of privateers, right? So you have a bunch of people, even through the season. So you have a bunch of people that you can root for. Like, man, if that guy had a factory slot, he'd, have an extra 5 horsepower, right? I could not. I think, people like Alonso aren't necessarily, and I'm saying Alonso as a person who won twice a gazillion years ago, back, when the dinosaurs were still roaming.
Yep.
And then he's just been there, right? He left for a little while, did some other stuff. I think he's probably the closest to a Verstappen than anything else. In fact, I honestly see Verstappen, because he did the 24-hour race or something like that. But I would love to see Hamilton venture out into endurance racing personally.
Absolutely.
Like how they used to do the World Series of racing or something like that. But like with the endurance race, like the old 8-hour endurance races where Valentino Rossi and the Japanese guy would always get together. And they always won. Connected, even though it was never Rossi that was the main person, it was always the other guy. And he was a World Superbike guy, whereas Rossi was MotoGP guy. Mm-hmm. So Alonso having success so long ago and then just kind of existing doesn't really hurt me as much. And I would kind of draw that correlation between, say, Nico Rosberg finally winning and then dipping out. Okay. He was a good driver, fantastic driver, right? Had killer instinct, all this. You couldn't hate him other than the fact that he was just the rival to your guy. Okay. When he left abruptly, you were forced to make a choice. Because I don't think there were too many people, his fans were basically people who just didn't want to like Hamilton, period. Okay. So then when he left, and he only really got success in that 1 year per se.
It didn't rock the boat too much.
Wasn't right. Now Hamilton having as much success, and then the whole thing that everybody's hanging on to the redemption story for 2021, because they're not looking at it as Hamilton winning. They're looking at it as Hamilton sticking it to the system that tried to screw him over. Okay.
2021 broke everything. I think just to interject, I think in 10 years, 25 years, people will look back and say that race in 2021 broke the sport in so many different places on different levels.
That was the second.
We're a different world after that, and it sounds dramatic to say it, but I think the sport it turned a complete page after that. And I think in retrospect, people will realize that was.
I look at that as being the second thing to drop. I don't know if there's been a third yet. I think I look at that as being the second. The first, which maybe you've thought about it, maybe you haven't, was Braun stepping outside of what was supposed to be, and them saying, "Oh, well, you didn't say this. We're going to put this 7-tuple rear diffuser on here, and we're going to kick everybody's ass with 2 sponsors." Right? In fact, Virgin didn't come until later because the car was almost completely white. If we remember that.
I hated when Virgin signed on because
it was a completely white car.
The history guy and me wanted somebody to win the World Championship
car or something
with no stickers on it. Yep.
I mean, and so I don't think he even came in until maybe like the 8th race or something like that. It was like close to the tail end of the season, and so I'm like, because it was just Braun by itself, right? It was just Braun, just like, what is this? It's like driving around a little piece of paper. It's like, what is this? And so I think when Hamilton goes, you're going to lose a bunch of your flighties. Okay. All of those folks, you're going to lose a bunch of people who like myself, which I'm not sure if it's me or not, as a person who can leave a sport. Right. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm kind of afraid of. Because I'm getting older and I got work and I fly airplanes and I do all this other kinds of stuff that's way more fun than sitting there being frustrated. Because if he crashes, I'm like, I ruined a day that I could have been flying, right? You know what I'm saying? And so I think because he's had that success and he just ups and goes, as opposed to, you know what? I would love to be like Vettel. and just go to Aston Martin, go to some bum squad and drive because I love driving. I don't even really want to see him do that. I would love to see him go to endurance or to GT. I'd like to see him and Vale on a team, to be honest.
Yep.
On a
Great sports
GT3
car
team.
team. Yep. Absolutely.
That would be cool. Or if they have I don't think they have any 3-man. Well, they do have 3-man endurance teams. I think 24 hours.
They do.
Oh, him, Verstappen, and Vale in a 3, that would be ridiculous. Okay,
that's brilliant, and that's that type of driver. And you're right. I think Hamilton. I hope Hamilton's like. I hope the people around Hamilton let him be like that, and that's what Alonso has been. And to a lesser extent, we saw Hulkenberg go off and win Le Mans for Porsche and stuff. And I think it speaks an awful lot to those guys, and informs us as to the reasons why they're in Formula One.
right.
They're there for the right reasons because they're racers. And not to pick on him, but an example that comes to mind is somebody like Daniel Ricciardo, who found himself without a seat in Formula One anymore. Fair enough, it happens. Shit happens. What's he knocking about the farm?
But he never did he?
He knocks about the farm and he sells sweatshirts now. The guy's got money in the bank. I expect him to turn up, do some touring car racing, turn up in GTs or something.
Right.
So that's up to him. That's his decision. But now I look back at him and think, you weren't really a racer. That wasn't in your heart.
I get that same impression, because there is a complete difference to me. Because like you said, was it Magnussen? Was it Magnussen that was doing the commentary, and then somebody called him and said, "Hey, I need you to." He was like getting ready to go race a Porsche. And he says, "Hey, I need you to fill in," and he runs back to go like get his. Was it Magnussen, right?
Yeah, it was Magnussen for Haas.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, that guy is like, how can you? He's never. I mean, did he win it? No, he podiumed. But it's like, guy's never going to win a race because he's never going to be on a team that's going to allow him to win a race. However, if I'm picking my 5-man basketball team, that guy's my center. Yeah. Always. Because I know he's going to show up, right? Yeah.
He's there for the right reasons.
He's there for the absolute right reasons. And I see a Hamilton like that. I see an Alonso like that. I hate Alonso more than anything, right? That's his name. But that guy is always getting picked. That guy can have no arms and one leg, and I'm still going to pick, right? I'm not sure about a Kimi type, but I really didn't like Kimi. He won. I just didn't like. I like Kimi back in the Lotus days more than I liked him in anything else. But
but we need these big characters. We need these guys who are racing drivers before they're Formula One drivers.
Correct.
Over and above being Formula One personalities or
right.
Formula One names. Heroes who are racing drivers, and I certainly hope we have another generation of those coming through. It's sometimes hard to see where they are. I guess we have, time will show. We have some great young racers in the field, and I suppose they'll mature and find their way.
I see Piastri as a V8 Formula or V8 sports car type of guy, right? Yeah. I see him driving a Mad Max, souped up 82 Camaro with jet engines on the side, just out there. Yeah, I just wanted to try to win the race. One of those types of
slightly more seriously, I could see if he stopped Formula One tomorrow, I could see him racing at the Bathurst, 12 hours in sports cars. That kind of guy.
And I'm like, I don't see Lando doing. You know what? I take it back. I see. This is what I see. This is one of the things that I don't like about a Lando type. I see him having an interest in some of this other stuff because they are still drivers. They're competitive, or hopefully. I don't see him like a Verstappen saying, "Oh, I wasn't necessarily asking. I'm going to go race this other race over here. I'm going to do that," as opposed to a publicist saying, if we look at our records, the demo of 15 to 32 isn't going to like you, especially if you don't win. So that kind of thing. Yeah. Bad part is I also see that for Hamilton.
Yes. Yeah.
But we know him from being a kid that is the complete opposite.
Yes.
Goes
Yes.
out, man, I'm racing paper airplanes. I'm doing this. And then so we don't know him in any other way. But I think somehow along the line, because we see him as a nice person and we see him as very soft spoken, but for when he's in the car, yelling and screaming and raging at the people and stuff like that. And it just sounds, we are like, yeah, Hamilton's being a dick. You know what I'm saying? That's what we want to see and hear. Hey, are we having a tea party? Like, what,
Yep.
you could get on the damn radio and give me some information but you never hear him cussing. You hear it every once in a while, but you never hear,
Yeah.
you don't hear him like Verstappen flipping out. Whereas you hear Verstappen flipping out, he's flipping out like, oh my God, my contact slid,
But
that,
it's a release, and it's the different ways they go racing. And you're right about Lewis, but it's something that jumps into my mind then that we maybe should have touched on for 26. I'm very Ferrari has this car which is looking okay. Might be the second best car in testing. Who really knows, right? I think Mercedes have much more to give, but it's going to be learning thereabouts. But the worry is Hamilton has not replaced the race engineer. The core relationship that's going to, if they have a fast racing car, the relationship that means that he wins races and gets results. And they moved on the guy he was working with last year, who, do you want me to make a cup of tea? That guy is gone. But, this is such a core relationship. And to me, it's those things around the Ferrari situation that are going to be problematic. And because I care about him, I'll worry about that. And not being able to produce his best because of that and other things.
knew that for him that was an issue, and that's why they promoted up Bono, right? Again, I draw this correlation between MotoGP and Formula One. My guy in MotoGP is Vale. The last season that he won a championship was the season before he never won another championship after he got rid of Jeremy Burgess.
Yes.
Right? As soon as he got rid of Jeremy Burgess for whatever their issues or reasons, that was it. He did well, won a race or two, this, that, and the other, but not Danny Pedrosa. Whatever the jackass. Marquez started coming up, right? Because I'm always trying to remember. I was like, you had your Sid Face Gibernau period. You had your Biaggi was the first one, Gibernau, and then you had what was it? Not Pedrosa, but the other Italian guy, and then Marquez. And so, because he was taking his colors and all this other stuff. And so, I mean, they have to get that done. And I guess they're bringing this other dude in, fourth or fifth race. Of course, everybody in Formula One knows each other. However, you have to have that relationship, that communication. And if you don't have that, if you don't trust, you're going to have a new guy and you don't trust this, that, and the other. It's not instinctive like it was with Bono, winning and losing.
I think that's the thing. It's winning and losing. It's interpreting each other's reactions, because you spoke about Verstappen being sweary, giving out car shit, this, that, and the other. GP knows how to take that from him. GP on the other side of the radio just lets it blow through. Knows it's not actually an attack on him and
They're
the team.
talking to themselves, I think, in many cases.
Yeah, it's just frustration. So there's that relationship between two people who know what's between the words that are being said, and knows what to pick up on, what to react to. And yeah, that's not the work of a moment to get that together.
In Ferrari, they are they're habitually
I'm waiting to hear this. Habitually what?
Oh my gosh, I'm trying to think of the right word. You can only look at. Let's put it. I'll back up and I'll quit on this because I can't think of the best word. But as good as Charles is, as good as Charles has always been, as much as what they, because when he got that first ridiculously long 5-year contract with Ferrari as an unproven kid. And he's just kind of been compliant. He still has the same guy. He has the same guy all these years. He's had some good cars, has some terrible cars, has some good luck, some bad luck, but he's just been a victim of poor management, the systems, and all this other stuff because they think that they know everything. They are, I'm still trying to find my word. They're habitual, they just, whatever it is for coming up short, right?
Well, I'll jump in and save you a wee bit. My thoughts on Ferrari, and even historically, or let's say not back to the start of say to the back of start of Formula One. Let's say my feeling on Ferrari is Ferrari aren't a particularly successful team. Ferrari are very important,
Correct,
and are wonderful, and have great brand value and have great value for fans and emotion. Ferrari historically have always been just successful enough
right.
now and again
And the premiership, right?
to stop them being a total laughing stock at any one stage.
People forget they had a stretch where they didn't do shit.
Yeah, yeah. And and even way back, 52, 53, they won the two championships.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of looked into that because the races were run to Formula 2, and it was like,
Right.
oh, we got quite a good Formula 2 car. Yeah, so there's wee pockets of success like that, and there's big, as you say, there's big gaps where it's like they're there or they're about, but they're making up the numbers.
Right, right.
So I think Ferrari are hugely important and emblematic, but I think sometimes fans almost expect too much from them.
Yeah.
Because historically, Ferrari winning everything, the Schumacher era is a real anomaly.
So, and here's the weird part about that is if you were at the very beginning of the Schumacher era, okay, we're talking about, well, not the Schumacher cheating area, so not the 95, 96 era, right? Not necessarily that, but as far as Schumacher and Ferrari, okay, so that's 2001? It was what, 2001 to 5, right?
Yeah.
Because it was Love in 2000 or 99 and 2000, I think. But if you started, again, that's 26 years ago, 25 years ago, and you were a flighty, Schumacher's my guy because he's the guy that's winning, and then you stuck with it, you're 25 years in the game, you still kind of came in like some of these weirdos have been coming in now. It just depends on if you have a product. But the difference is there was a product. Whereas now, you don't have that. And I'm like, it's possible that you can grab some people. I just don't think you're going to grab as many.
I think, but there was a lot of Schumacher fans back then, and it's not like now. We didn't have the social media. You don't
Schumacher fans as opposed to Ferrari fans.
Yeah,
right.
you don't have the data, and you can't really look back on it. But my sense at that time, the Schumacher era was the first time that I got a sense that there was fanboys for the driver.
Yeah,
that there was Schumacher fans, and me being whatever 15 years or 20 years into the sport at that point, I was like, okay, so it's cool.
Yeah.
But some people are picking up on this because they like the German guy, and the German guy is brilliant.
Yeah.
But I like it all. I came into it as a sport, but some people are picking up on the guy.
Right.
That was the first time I noticed that.
Yeah, it was weird, especially after you had your Villeneuves and for those couple of years, and you had your Magnusons of the time, which would be like Coulthard, and Ralph, which was basically Papa Stroll's kid, right? Except Ralph would win, or I think he won maybe 3 races ever, if that. But whereas I don't know why I can't Lance, I can't think of his name. So you still had a core group of people that were outside of your number one guy who was winning all the time, who seemingly still had a shot. But of course, you still had, different strategies because you could refuel, which I wish I wish they could do the refueling, to be honest. I mean, I know people don't like it just because of that one incident where, the tire got away from them and it caught the fire. But I mean, that can happen. But, now, especially with this new iteration of cars, if during the first race, okay, this is next weekend, during the first race, there's more than two cars that suffer an RPM issue, either after a straight or just whatever, whenever, or if within the first two races, there's more than one car that causes a crash due to the RPM issue.
Yeah, like a sudden slowing. Yep.
We're done. We're done, because you're going to tune people out to say, well, it's not necessarily the driver's fault. And it's not necessarily the fact that the teams developed a shit car. It's because
it's all new.
The FIA created this limitation that is impossible. You can't fault the driver, because the driver can say, this thing is just entirely too complicated. If they all get on the same page and say, this is entirely too complicated, and then you get your engineers that say, well, the cars cannot function based upon the layouts of all of these tracks. And Formula One says, oh, well, let's make it a sprint. Let's make it a sprint race in a street track that has a whole bunch of curves that you can't pass anybody on. And at least you can finish a race. And then the owners are going to, or Ferrari is then going to say, well, we told the owners this, like you said before, we told the owners this already. They already knew. So we've got a problem at the start. We've got a problem in the middle, which is going to affect the very, very end if anybody gets there. And you cannot blame anybody but F1/FIA. And if that's the case, and they can't make that, and then they're so slow and deliberative in their changes and all this other stuff because they're worried about CYA and the whole nine, then it's done. It's done. Yeah. And they're not only going to, because imagine the drive to survive if there's another one that comes out after that. They're, because F1 has, final say in the editing.
Yes. They're
definitely going to edit out the, well, we told you so. Unless it's such a big, huge thing and they absolutely can't. They're going to super minimize it. But if it gets to that point, and it's only going to take two cars, and if it's early in the race, especially if it's early in the race, and you suffer that kind of issue, you're not coming back from that. You're gonna lose fans. You're gonna lose us, established us's. We might, and it's not that we're not going to tune in again. We're just going to tune in until we see it again, and we're like, oh, this shit again.
Yep. And I think you're right, and they're already talking in terms, as I said, they're talking about modifying the start procedure. They've done it in practices, and it looks like to a certain extent, at least, they'll do that for the race. There's also talk in terms of perhaps changing the parameters of the level of regeneration that's available, the level of deployment. So there's obviously a sense that behind the scenes people are running the numbers and having the conversations and saying, you know what, we might be in a bit of trouble here. Mm-hmm. And to me, the fact they're doing that 10 days out from the first race is just crazy, because these as I said an hour and a half ago, these regulations have been coming down the line a long time and are part of the fact that the sport now wants to, if not have a spec car, write a set of regulations that in every parameter shapes the motor car and how it goes racing, perhaps like never before. So if they've gone down this route, they've put in the years of work, all the big brains and all the big computers have crunched the numbers, and it's taken 6 days running in Bahrain for everybody to go, this doesn't quite, at very best, this doesn't quite work the way you wanted it to work. It may be a whole lot worse than that, but that's maybe the very best scenario. If they've got to that stage, to me, that's fundamental mismanagement by the people in charge of the sport, that we've got to 7 days to the first race, and we don't quite know what kind of motor race we're going to see, and we don't quite know what kind of compromises to the running of the race we're going to see to try and make it viable.
So let me ask you this, because I think you might be more familiar with not necessarily the start procedure, but just the dynamics of the engine as it relates to the start procedure, recharging and all this other stuff. So then, would a successful start require your warm-up lap at the beginning to be done a little bit hotter.
There seems to be,
You know what I'm saying?
yeah, there seems to be sort of two trains of thought about this. There's a sense that perhaps as well, the lap to the grid may have to be slower. That everybody wants as much energy retained in the car as possible. We're going to see, something George Russell commented on, and some of the journalists were also talking about how Max Verstappen was racing the car, holding these cars in a very low gear, having them absolutely wailing, because everything has to be focused on getting energy back into that battery.
Right.
Yeah, George Russell said it's like kind of like imagine it's the roundabout at the supermarket, and instead of everybody going round the roundabout in third gear in their car, all of a sudden they're in first gear at 30 mile an hour. Way.
Right.
So they're gonna have to think in terms, and it's something Adrian Newey said a couple of years ago, I think, when they were discussing this. Adrian Newey says you do realise everybody will go round to hairpin at Monaco with their foot to the floor and the clutch disengaged to charge their battery,
Right.
while they're rolling around there at 50 kilometers an hour or whatever. So, first of all, you're going to want to arrive on the grid with all this electrical energy in place, everything that you've got. But then the problem being that the removal of the MGU-H, which, as you probably know, captured heat
Right.
energy.
Normal.
Yep, but also worked in reverse, and then it could deploy that energy to the battery, it could
Right.
apply it to the crank, but also it could deploy it back to the turbo to reduce turbo lag, spin the turbo up.
Okay.
You capture that heat energy,
Yeah.
and you use it at appropriate times to keep the turbo spinning
Right.
when you're off the throttle.
Right.
You're going to have all the guys rolling around for the start procedure, sitting on the grid. They normally sit at, a high tick over or whatever. They select their first gear and then they go. You're going to have to take a certain amount of time for these turbos to spin up to a speed where they produce enough power. Some of the practice starts from the outside, looked really pitiful. There were some really poor looking ones. The data seems to say, I know the BBC talked to somebody who seemed to say that the Mercedes engines are better than what they look, and actually everybody will get off the line cleanly. But it comes back again to perception. We had a couple of practice starts at the end of test day sessions broadcast on TV, where cars bogged down,
Right.
cars barely moved. George Russell says he had the worst start he ever had in a racing car. The lights went out. George dropped the clutch and led two big black lines for like 50 yards down the track, and just never. It was just all the rubber went on the track, and he never really went anywhere.
But they got traction control.
Sorry?
But they have traction control supposedly, right? This year? Or just the active? That's right. It's just the active aero. I'm sorry. It's just active aero, not traction control. They've never
just active aero. So like it really, and like I like things like Formula E. I don't mind a certain amount of complexity. I love technology.
Right.
And I've been really, I'm loving all this talk about what the Mercedes engine may or may not be doing. I love it from a technical point of view. It's great stuff. It's good old fashioned reading what the regulations say and noting what the regulations don't say, and then going down that route. I love all that kind of stuff, but I can't really get my head around how we're gonna go motor racing.
I mean,
what lap two at Albert Park is going to look like.
I mean, qualifying then is going to be a too hot lap. It has to be. It's got to be. I mean, well, I wouldn't say too hot lap, but you're going to probably have to do your lead-in lap at 80%, I would think, in order to have enough juice stored, because you're gonna have to throw it around a little bit. So you're gonna have to have enough juice to get after it on the lap that you want.
Or will you have to go relatively slow with the engine bouncing off the rev limiter? That's the other way. Are you charging batteries? Are you out of 8 gears, are you holding it in fifth down the back straight because you're just running? You're driving a generator around to the start line.
So then, or on that then what's going to happen, because most of the people that are, usually there's a turn, a penultimate turn right before you get to your start straight. So that means that in that last section, you're going to gun it, and you're going to have a whole bunch of people losing it around that last turn to, because they crank it up right there. So you're going to have a bunch of people start off early, get around that turn, and once they get there, they're going to
1,000 horsepower, boom.
Right.
And they're going to come out of that corner. They're going to come out of this hypothetical or real final corner with their battery charged, eager, because this is their chance. This is qualifying. And they're going to come round that corner. They're going to hit the button to flatten their wings on their active aero.
Mm-hmm.
Who's got the balls to do it first? Who can live with it out of the corner? Boom, down the straight. But from then on, it's how you deploy that energy. Right. It's the ticking clock.
Because they want you to keep deploying it. They want you to keep. Plus, you have to. But from what I understand, when you're going down the straight, so maybe you can help me out with this, because I know got the little, basically an overdrive button. Okay, so they got an overdrive button.
They've got like an overboost, which is kind of replacing DRS.
Right.
Like a 1 second thing. They've got I think it's extra electrical energy.
Basically. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, but if you never use any of that, and you're just gunning it down a straight, okay, you're just using the energy that you just happen to have, period.
Yeah. And again, that's going to be programming. That's going to be your engineers having if literally it's like, if they tell you it's qualifying lap, set it to mode 4, and then it's just you, the throttle, and the gear shift. Mm-hmm. Presumably, the engineers have crunched the numbers and done the programming in terms of energy deployment. Mm-hmm. Yeah, electrical energy deployment. Right. I presume they're going to have to try and optimize that.
Right.
But as I say, I have trouble getting my head around it, and it's interesting to see that journalists on the ground out there, some of them are having trouble getting their head around it as well. It's fascinating, and it's troubling at the same time.
From a person who, again, I'm a little weird like that. I want my guy to win. I want your guy to lose.
Yep.
That's how it should be. That's how it should be. Yep. But I want there to still be a race. And yes, all of those can exist at the same time. I would love for your guy to crash out or bounce out, or actually, I'd rather your guy to just fall behind. I don't even want him to crash. I want him to fall way behind so I can laugh, right?
Yep. But if the whole race falls apart, there's no race for your guy to win or my guy to win.
If it's a DRS train and everybody's racing to be the caboose versus the engine, then that's nobody, what is there to watch? Especially from TV, from not being there. Being there, you can get a little excited because you can, and you're there with everybody else, and you're
being there, we've all been there. In a sense, being there, you don't watch the race,
right?
In terms of tactics and strategy, you're there, you have a great time and you enjoy it. Yeah. But I think the bigger problem will be, even in terms of commentators trying to explain what we're seeing and accurately explain what we're seeing.
Oh, I can't wait to see Karun try to explain something that anything. Actually, I don't. Danica Patrick making an ass out of herself. I can't wait to see that, because that.
Danica, bless her. Oh dear.
Something to her, but yeah. I mean, it's and then. Well, here's another issue that I'm gonna hate. It's going to make races like Miami better, and I hate everything about Miami. And I don't want to watch it because it's in Miami. I just moved from, that area. But because it's in a car park, right? It's in a parking lot at Sun Life Stadium. Mm-hmm. You're going to have the ability. There's no passing there other than that little back straight, but you're going to have the ability to recharge a lot. And I think that this is going to, the only way to have better racing is to have them in street circuits, where we can create all of this, that, and the other that, is less, it's less of an expense on a town, a city, or a particular billionaire that owns the stadium or the track. But, Spa, cars aren't going to finish the race.
Nope. Nope. So somebody made a great meme about Spa the other day. There's like a fake FIA account, I think it's on Twitter, and they'd mocked up this photograph and they said the FIA announces a new fan activation, which is basically a zebra crossing going along Eau Rouge, and the cars all have to stop for the traffic for the pedestrians.
They better hope it rains. They better hope it rains for the next 5 years at Spa, like it has been for the last 2 or 3, because in Japan. Suzuka is, it's gonna rain because unless I can't even remember what time of year that it is, because every October, did they move it back to October?
They're early this year. They are very soon. The 29th of March is Japan this year.
March, okay. Yeah, because I remember last year I think it was in April or something like that. So they probably changed it because of the rain, but yeah, because it was an out of weird thing, because they started that part of the year, that part of the world, and then they went to Japan, and nobody would watch it because we're all asleep. But well, you guys can watch it because you guys are you're on that same side of the world. It's just earlier, but over here it's 12 hours, 13 hours difference. So I'm knocked out. But even Suzuka might have some challenges, but. I mean, Spa is going to be terrible.
Yeah.
Baku's
Baku's
going to be hilarious.
But Baku is sketchy at the best of times. That straight and the unsighted and the pit lane.
Sure.
I hold my breath sometimes watching Baku with these perfectly normal cars that we've had until now.
Yeah.
The fact that we may have slow runners, it's not good. But you're saying about Suzuka, I think Suzuka will be a problem, because you come out of the double turn at Spoon and all the way uphill, all that back straight.
You're going to wipe out. You're going to wipe.
And then at 130, like, if somebody's going slow there, somebody not realizing and not quite having the boost that they think they have at the end of that straight.
What's the track with the bank, the high bank? I can't remember if they're going there. Is it in the Netherlands?
Zandvoort, yeah.
Yeah, in Zandvoort. So that unfortunately might be a good race like Miami because of that bank, I think. Yeah. Because they're gonna and nobody's gonna lose it because there's a bank there, right? But yeah, I mean, what's his nose is gonna be terrible too. Interlagos is gonna be terrible.
One of the great circuits, and one that has given us fantastic racing over this last 10 years, and again, absolutely bonkers. Perhaps the one place where sprint racing has worked, Interlagos, is not a sprint race this weekend. It's not a sprint weekend, and that's probably the sprint at Interlagos has probably been. I hate the sprint races, but it's maybe been the one that's produced something that's done justice to Grand Prix.
That's because of the track. That's because
100%.
Everybody loves the track, and that straight is just insane. Plus, there's a high degree of seeing Massa's dad just lose his face falling off. So, because I never really thought too much of it, because I thought that they raced at a different track previously to Interlagos, but ever since watching Felipe Massa's dad just then that's just been, I've just loved it after that. But other than Abu Dhabi, and I guess it depends on if who you're a fan of, but that's the only thing that's been remotely close. You know what I'm saying? The only thing that I can liken to that emotion was Aguero. You know what I'm saying? Those are the only two events that strike the same emotion. I can watch it in repeat. And I hear Balotelli tipping the ball over to Aguero. It is the announcer. Was it Drury? I think that's who it was.
I'm not sure.
Peter Drury. I can't remember if it was Peter Drury or not. But he's like, Aguero! And I'm getting them now because I remember. And then watching Hamilton going around the corner, and it's always that shot of Mass's dad, and he's hugging everybody, and he looks back at the camera, he's like,
is that Glock? It's
right,
Glock. That's
right,
Glock.
right. So, and it's that, the through goes Hamilton is kind of similar. That brief second, the through goes Hamilton is, but I don't see the average 2026. I don't see the average 2026. I see cars going down, and the sound like that very whatever you call it, sound of the car kind of the fluid, and it dies on the side of the road and it's popping and stuff like that because the antifreeze is out and the radiator just bust open. That's what I imagine. And part of me wants to see it because I really hate MBS, right? Mm-hmm. However, I don't want my guy. I don't want it to happen to my guy. And other than, I only really wanted to happen to Lando because almost every other driver I do like. The other guy that Lawson, I'd be totally fine if it happened to Lawson. If Sargent was still driving, be totally fine if it happened to him too. Even Lance, but we almost expect it to happen to Lance, so it's not really that big of a deal. But
so is it kind of fair to say that while you wish the sport the best, you kind of think it needs to fall to its knees, if not to fall flat on its face?
Yeah.
To provoke the change that needs to come.
To me, the only way, and this is even going back to my previous lawyer days and stuff like that, because so much of it is contrived and it's Shakespeare and the whole nine, and there's a high degree of, like I said, Shakespeare in the park. I mean, if the system doesn't want this particular outcome, then that outcome's not going to occur, right? Especially in criminal stuff. Here in the States, it's different in everywhere else in the world because it's fair. But I think that the best way for change isn't, you work on the inside and the whole nine, is you expose the flaws in real time in the harshest way possible, so much so that it embarrasses the people to where they are now no longer bulletproof. You're not infallible. You can't do anything right. Yeah. And perhaps maybe they dip, they go, they leave, and I think that, we had this, going back to the whole VAR type thing and the refs and stuff, you had that same issue with the very, very curious, Stewart decisions over all of last year. Nothing was consistent ever from one race to the other. And you had the same guys. Nothing was consistent, right? But that led to the idea that it's a production and not a race. We need an outcome because we need that. They're not going to shake the whole Verstappen stuff. I think Verstappen is aware of that, and he's just like, I can't do anything about it. However, it does make me look like I'm whatever. Best thing that could have happened to Verstappen was McLaren coming up a little bit, right? Because now nobody's really looking at that the same way. So I think with this and this change in the season, everybody loved the fact that the cars are a little shorter. Everybody loved the fact that the cars have changed conceptually, that the cars have changed. Anything is better than the shit that we had for the last 5 years, 5 years.
Maybe live to regret thinking that, but while shorter, lighter, perhaps we've sidestepped into just a different set of problems.
Again, my idea of the shorter is, Monaco. Again, it's because, I want, and again, it's because I do love racing. I think in many ways, as much as I loved the fact that MotoGP, the bikes went to first 600 and then they went to the 900, then they went to 1,000. I don't even know what they are now, right? But that they went that way, whereas like the super bikes, you can have a little bit higher CC because of the twins versus the inline sixes and all that other kind of stuff. So that part I get, the whole nine, but I'm fine with, but I still think that the GP racing was better as 500s because it brought in, you had a ton of privateers. Yeah, you had Honda. Yeah, you had, everybody else was a factory team, and the factory teams were like, we'll give you like a radiator, and you can say that you're, this one-off Honda team, but you're never going to be, the Honda team. You're not going to be, what is it, Repsol. You're not going to be them. And so, even not Suzuki. Yeah, even Suzuki wasn't the same. The Marlboro Suzuki versus Camel and all those other guys. It wasn't the same. The Camel, I think, was Honda. So Camel Honda was never going to be Repsol, right? So, and people knew that, understood that, and it was just whatever level. I think, so I was happier with, okay, the cars need to be smaller, because with the cars smaller, they can fit on the circuits, because the circuits haven't gotten larger. The circuits are the same circuits. The cars have turned into, an F-22 versus an SU-57. If you put the two together, one looks like a C5 and the other one looks like an F5, right? They're huge, but you look at them from the picture by themselves, they look like they're the same kind of cool looking plane. But they're huge. It's like my laptop versus my mouse sitting right next to it. And so I was fine with that. Any change, they still have some of the ground affecting type stuff, and they're using some of the other stuff to kind of assist and everything. Get that, totally fine, blah, blah, blah. But now, when you're tampering with the engine is racing. Mm-hmm. The engine is racing. A good race car driver will put bike tires on their Formula One car. As long as they can control what their engine does, they'll adjust. But now you've taken all of that out, and you make everything else the aero, and you can design this and how it flows through, and side pods, no pods, all that kind of stupid stuff. Now it's like, and then it's cost, like, I don't like the cost cap, to be honest. I personally don't like it, because it takes the innovation out, and you're going to kill yourself if you run out of money. But they're worried about you being able to finish the season, So, it's those kinds of dumb things that I'm just like, the cost cap is not an issue if you add teams. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? If you add teams, then you have to worry about that, because you still want to win. So you got to be a little bit more frugal with how you spend it and all this other kind of stuff. And get the right driver that doesn't crash your shit all the time and yada, yada, yada. But so I'm excited, and I'm happy that the cars are smaller, but this other stuff with the engines, I'm not as happy. And if the drivers themselves, if they're all saying we can't drive this iteration of car, not I can't drive my car because my engineers suck, but I cannot drive this car because of the power plant, you do not have racing. You might as well just put them out there on bicycles, right? And that's, I'm not looking forward to that, because the cost to watch it has not dropped. So if you end up having this shitty ass car and you can't finish a race and the racing is terrible, the problem is, it's no longer worth your time. It's definitely not worth the amount that you're paying for it. And that's going to make people dip the fastest, because they're not going to give, it's going to be Spa. I can't remember the year. Was it 2021? It's going to be Spa 2021. They didn't want to give anybody any money back. So they just said, we'll just have you parade around and give half points or whatever that stupid thing they ended up doing. So they didn't have to pay them any money back. So, I want the season to start, first of all, because it hasn't been around for a while. So I want that right out of the chute. After that, secondarily, I want to watch a race. And if it's not a race and it's just a procession, then I'm going to go to work, or I'm going to go fly my airplane, or I'm going to possibly watch it on DVR. But you're not going to have me wake up in the middle of the night, make my coffee, and I'm going to hurry up and make something and go outside, because I'll watch on my computer outside. I live out in the country. I live on a farm now. And do all that stuff, get ready early in the morning. And then It's like the Price is Right losing horn. I'm not going to do that a whole bunch because I'm just not going to do it. I hope it's not. I hope it's not. It's going to be bad enough. Yuki's not there. Hearing him flip out every once in a while, which he did go overboard a lot. But, with the lameness and zero personalities of the guys, they're not allowed to yell and cuss and stuff like that because they have this little whatever. And then Lando won last year, so they're going to be focusing on his lame ass for the first couple of races. Alonso not finishing, that's going to be a story. Audi and Cadillac, the fact that they're there, but then they're going to be finishing way in the back. Or maybe they'll be in the front. Who knows? Hamilton not knowing who he's going to be talking to this week versus the next week versus the next week. And then they're going to continuously talk about Mercedes and how they've got this perceived advantage, but it's only going to last for so long because the FIA is going to change the rule and this, that, and the other. And is it fair? And is it not fair? And it's like, well, where's the racing on the track on the TV? Tell us about it. Yep. Like you said, the guys aren't going to be able to explain any of this shit because they've no experience in it. They don't understand it. They're not driving it. The guys that they can interview don't really get it and understand it. They don't have any answers when the race is over. You might as well, interview the guy who finishes last. Why'd you finish last? Shit, because the cars suck.
Well, here, Malik, I think after 2 hours, I think you have just entirely summed up what we're looking forward to at the start of the season.
Yeah.
You know what I think? It's been a super conversation. Absolutely loved it. I think there's so many things hanging in the air, and we agree about so many things. I think we should make a plan to, in a couple of months' time or whatever, after a few races, get together again.
Yeah.
And see where we are. And see where we are and see how it's all shaken out. What do you think?
Right. What was proven wrong? What can be improved? What needs to go away? Yeah, I'm absolutely on that. That's if we're still alive, because it's possible that, this entire earth, because of these guys, could, so it's wishful thinking that we're even still here in the first place. But yeah, no, I think that, I'm 1,000% in on that. It's going to be interesting. But there's a degree of excitement with that too. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Now we're not, now on the 7th, let's see, the 6th is Friday. So the race itself is what, on the 8th?
It's on the 8th. Yep.
Okay.
8th of March.
So, yeah, by the end of that day, we're either, or we're, because our guy didn't win, or maybe our guy didn't win. But if our guy does win and it's just like, well, the only reason why he won is because everybody else's car stalled, then you're not going to be happy. And the 9th, I kind of hope there's a bunch of meetings. I pray that there's a bunch of meetings. I hope that there's not. Put it that way. That's weird. But, there's only one way to, wait and see. But, yeah, let's definitely do that. And hell, that's okay. We put some money on it. Like, how many people? See, in the UK, you guys can gamble a lot easier. We can't because only the rich people can do that. We're not allowed to. Well, they can get away with it. We can't.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting, man. It's gonna be interesting.
It's going to be good. Well, here, Malik, I think after 2 hours, I think we should wrap it up for our audience.
Sure.
Here, thanks so much for such an interesting conversation.
Yes, sir.
Really, really brilliant. And I really hope we can get to revisit it all again really soon. But
absolutely.
Thanks for your time.
You too. Thanks, buddy.
Take care.
All right.
See you again, folks. Thanks for watching.